For 38 years, he repaired watches in a tiny shop 2 blocks from the Pentagon. Generals, admirals, colonels, they all brought him their Rolexes and Omegas, their father's pocket watches, their grandfather's timepieces. He fixed them with hands that never trembled, with precision that bordered on magical. They called him Mr. Chen and paid him $20 and never asked questions. Until the day a 4-star admiral brought in a watch that hadn't worked in 40 years, and the old watchmaker's hands stopped moving. He looked at the engraving on the back and whispered one word: impossible. The shop was easy to miss. Wedged between a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese restaurant, barely 12 feet wide, with a faded sign that read, Chen's Watch Repair, since 1987. In letters that needed repainting. The kind of place you walked past 1,000 times without seeing. Inside, Master Sergeant, retired. David Chen sat at his workbench, a jeweler's loupe magnifying his right eye, his hands steady as stone as he worked on the escapement of a 1952 Omega Seamaster. At 73, his hands were weathered but precise, each movement deliberate. Each adjustment measured in microns. The shop smelled of metal polish and old paper. The walls were covered with watches, hundreds of them, clocks ticking in different rhythms, creating a symphony of time passing at different speeds. In the corner, a grandfather clock that had belonged to his father. On the shelf behind him, tools that had belonged to his grandfather. 3 generations of watchmakers, all compressed into this 12-foot wide shop 2 blocks from the Pentagon. Chen wore the same thing every day. Dark slacks, white shirt, reading glasses on a chain, suspenders. His gray hair was cut military short, though he'd been retired for 38 years. Some habits died hard. The bell above the door chimed. Chen didn't look up. He was at a critical moment. The balance wheel needed 0.02 millimeters of adjustment, and looking away meant starting over. "Be with you in 1 moment," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that 38 years in Virginia hadn't erased. Shanghai, if you knew what to listen for, though most people didn't. He made the adjustment. Perfect. The watch resumed its steady tick, 37 years of practice, and it still brought him satisfaction. Not joy, he'd left joy behind in 1975, but satisfaction, the quiet pleasure of making broken things work again. Chen set down the Omega, removed his loupe, and looked up. An admiral stood in his shop. You could tell by the bearing before you saw the uniform, the way he filled the space, the way he expected to be noticed. 4 stars on each shoulder board, ribbons cascading down his chest. Late 60s, white hair, face weathered by command and consequence. Mr. Chen? The Admiral's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Yes, sir. How can I help you? Chen stood slowly. His knees weren't what they used to be. The Admiral reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He set it on the workbench with the careful precision of someone handling something precious. I need you to look at this watch. It hasn't worked in 40 years. Every other watchmaker I've taken it to says it can't be fixed, that the mechanism is too damaged. But I've heard you're the best, that you can fix anything. Chen opened the box. Inside was a Hamilton military field watch. Standard issue, or had been once. The case was battered, the crystal cracked, the leather band so dried and cracked it was barely holding together. But Chen's eye went immediately to the hands. Frozen at 3:47, may I? He asked, gesturing to the watch. The Admiral nodded. Chen lifted it from the box with the reverence he gave all timepieces. A watch wasn't just metal and gears. It was time made visible, memory made tangible. He turned it over to examine the back, and froze. Engraved on the case back. Worn, but still readable. LT. William Bradford, Operation Thunder. Reign September 18th, 1975 for SGT Chen. You saved more than my life. Chen's hands, which never trembled, trembled. The room swam. 40 years collapsed into 40 seconds, and suddenly he was back there, back in the jungle, back in the rain, back in the moment when everything ended and nothing would ever be the same. Impossible, he whispered. The Admiral leaned forward. Mr. Chen, are you all right? Chen set the watch down carefully before his hands betrayed him further. He removed his glasses, pinched the bridge of his nose, breathed. This watch, he said slowly. Where did you get this watch? It belonged to my father. He was Navy, died in 1975. I was 17. This was the only personal effect that came back. The Admiral's voice carried 40 years of grief compressed into professional composure. It's been broken since the day I got it. Stopped at 347. I've carried it anyway. Every promotion, every deployment, every command. It's been with me. Not working, but with me. Your father, Chen said, and his voice sounded strange in his own ears. Lieutenant William Bradford. The Admiral's face went pale. How do you know that? Chen turned the watch over, showing him the engraving he must have read 1,000 times. Because I'm Sergeant Chen. The Admiral's mouth opened. No sound came out. He gripped the edge of the workbench, his knuckles white. Chen walked to his office in the back. Really just a closet with a desk and a file cabinet. He opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a box he hadn't touched in decades. Didn't let himself touch. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was his own watch. An Omega Seamaster. Still working, still keeping perfect time, though he never wore it anymore. He brought it back to the workbench and set it beside the Hamilton. Turned it over. SGT. David Chen Operation Thunder. Reign September 18th, 1975 from LT. Bradford. You gave me tomorrow. The Admiral stared at both watches. His father's broken timepiece and the Watchmaker's perfect one. Two halves of a story he'd never heard. You were there, he whispered. You were with him when he died. No, Chen said quietly. I was there when he lived. If this story of hidden identity and a watch that changed everything already has you hooked, hit that like button and subscribe. What happens when this humble watchmaker reveals why that particular timepiece made a 4-star admiral's face go white will remind you that some debts can never be repaid. Now, let's go to that small repair shop where time was about to stop. Chen didn't want to remember. Had spent 38 years building a life designed specifically to not remember. But now, with the Admiral staring at him and his father's watch sitting between them like a ghost made metal, the memories came anyway. September 18th, 1975, classified operation in Cambodia. 14 men, Navy SEALs and Special Forces. Mission: extract a CIA asset and his family before the Khmer Rouge found them. Simple extraction. In and out. Routine, they'd said. Nothing in war was routine. They'd been compromised 6 clicks from the LZ. Ambush. Heavy contact. The jungle exploding around them. Sergeant David Chen, 23 years old, fresh from Ranger School, carrying the radio because he was the youngest, and that's what the youngest guy always carried. Lieutenant Bradford, 32, Navy SEAL, had been the officer in charge. Cool under fire, made the hard calls. When the shooting started, he'd organized the defense, gotten the civilians to cover, called for extraction while bullets tore through the canopy above them. Then the RPG hit. Bradford went down hard. Shrapnel in his leg, his side, his shoulder. Radio destroyed. Their medic already dead. The Khmer Rouge closing in. The rest of the team fighting a desperate rearguard action. Chen had crawled to him. dragged him into cover behind a fallen teak tree, tied tourniquets with strips torn from his own uniform, stuffed field dressings into wounds that were too big, too deep, too many. "Leave me," Bradford had gasped, blood in his mouth. "Get the civilians out." "Shut up, sir," Chen had replied. Nobody dies today, but people were dying. 3 of their team already gone. The civilians pinned down. The Khmer Rouge learning their position. The extraction helicopter still 10 minutes out and 10 minutes in that jungle was a lifetime. That's when Bradford had done something Chen would never forget. He'd pulled off his watch, the Hamilton military field watch he'd worn since OCS, and pressed it into Chen's hand. "When you get home," Bradford said, "find my son, William Bradford, Jr. Tell him his father thought about him at the end. Tell him I was brave. You're not dying. Promise me." Chen had promised. Then he'd picked up his rifle and killed 12 men to keep that promise. The details after that were blurry. Violence and chaos and fear compressed into actions that saved lives. He'd held the position while the helicopter came in, got Bradford and the civilians aboard, took 3 rounds himself but stayed on his feet long enough to see them lift off. The helicopter had crashed 20 minutes later. Engine failure. Everyone aboard killed instantly, including Lieutenant Bradford. Chen had been in a field hospital when he learned. He'd survived. Bradford hadn't. The CIA asset and his family hadn't. The operation was classified, buried, erased. The men who died were listed as training accidents or helicopter maintenance incidents. There was no mission. There were no heroes. There was just silence. Chen had carried Bradford's watch back to the States, had tried to find the son, but William Bradford Jr. was in foster care, moved around, lost in the system. Chen was discharged medical. The bullets had done damage that ended his military career at 24. He'd searched for 2 years, finally given up. He'd learned watchmaking instead, his grandfather's trade. Something quiet, something precise, something where broken things could be fixed and time moved forward instead of backward. He'd never found the son. Until now. He thought about me? The Admiral's voice cracked. 40 years of wondering, and finally an answer. "Always," Chen said. "Every moment. He made me promise to tell you he was brave. Was he?" Chen looked at this man, this 4-star admiral who'd spent his life trying to live up to a father he'd never known, and told him the truth. He was terrified. We all were, but he gave orders anyway, made the decisions anyway. Saved the civilians anyway. Brave isn't not being afraid. Brave is being afraid and doing it anyway. Your father was the bravest man I ever served with. The Admiral's eyes were wet. A 4-star admiral, commander of fleets, responsible for thousands of sailors, crying in a watch repair shop in Arlington. I've spent my entire career wondering who he was. I was 17 when the Navy knocked on our door. They gave us this watch and a flag and said he died in a training exercise. I knew it was a lie. Nobody gets a Bronze Star with V device for dying in a training accident. Chen nodded. Operation Thunder Rain is still classified. Probably will be for another decade. I joined the Navy because of him. Became a SEAL. Deployed to every hellhole on Earth. Made Admiral. All because I was trying to understand the man who left me this broken watch. He looked at Chen. And you've been here, 2 blocks from the Pentagon. For 38 years. 38 years, Chen confirmed. Why didn't you find me? I tried. For 2 years, but you'd been moved around in foster care. The trail went cold. And Chen hesitated. I learned to leave the past alone. It's easier, safer, easier for who? The question hung in the air between them, sharp as shrapnel. For me, Chen admitted. I'm a coward, Admiral. Your father was brave. I'm just a watchmaker who survived. The Admiral picked up his father's watch. looked at the frozen hands. 3:47, the moment time stopped for his father. Can you fix it? Chen picked up the watch, examined it with a jeweler's eye. The case was corroded. The crystal was cracked. The crown was frozen. The movement inside would be damaged from 40 years of neglect and grief. Yes, he said, but it will take time. A week, maybe 2. I'll need to fabricate some parts, source others. It won't be cheap. I don't care what it costs. And when it's running again, it won't keep perfect time. The balance is damaged. It might run fast or slow. It will need regular adjustment. I don't care, Chen nodded. He understood. This wasn't about telling time. This was about bringing a father back to life, if only in the ticking of a mechanical heart. There's something else, the Admiral said. I want to know everything, every detail of that day, what he said, what he did, how he died. I've spent 40 years with silence. I want the truth. The truth is classified. I have TSSCI clearance. I've read every operation report from 1975. Thunder Rain isn't in any of them. But I know people. I can get the files unsealed. The Admiral leaned forward. I want to write his story. His real story. Not the lie the Navy told my mother. I want the world to know who Lieutenant William Bradford was. And I want them to know about Sergeant Chen, who kept his promise. No, Chen said firmly. I don't want recognition. I want to fix watches. This isn't about recognition. It's about truth. The truth is I survived and better men died. That's not a story. That's just guilt with better lighting. The Admiral studied him for a long moment. He saved your life, didn't he? Before the end. That's why you carry this. He gestured at the Omega on the workbench. Chen picked up his watch. The one that still worked. The one Bradford had bought for him with his own money after Chen's watch had been destroyed in a training accident 6 months before Thunder Rain. He saw me looking at this in a shop window in Saigon. We had a weekend pass. I told him it was too expensive. He bought it anyway. Said a ranger deserved a good watch. Had it engraved. Chen's voice was thick. I was wearing it when I pulled him out of the kill zone. I checked the time when the helicopter took off. 3:47. Understanding dawned on the Admiral's face. That's why his watch stopped at 3:47. I don't know why his watch stopped. I wasn't on the helicopter. I didn't even know he'd kept wearing it after giving it to me. I thought it was in my pocket. Chen paused. But yes, 3:47 is when he lived and died and lived again. All in the same moment, the two men sat in silence, surrounded by the ticking of 100 clocks, each keeping time in their own way, some fast, some slow, none of them perfect. But all of them trying. I'll fix your father's watch, Chen said finally, and I'll tell you everything about that day. But then I go back to my shop and my tools and my routine. I don't want fame. I don't want recognition. I want to be left alone. Why? Because your father died a hero. I lived a coward. And no story changes that mathematics. The Admiral picked up both watches. His father's broken timepiece and Chen's perfect one. You carried his watch for 2 years looking for me. You've carried his memory for 40. That's not cowardice. That's fidelity. He set the watches down between them. Fix this watch. Tell me about my father. And then let me tell you something about the man who saved him. Chen worked on the watch 16 hours a day. He fabricated a new mainspring from scratch. Sourced a period-correct crown from a collector in Switzerland. Hand-cut a new crystal from mineral glass. Cleaned every component with the patience of prayer. Oiled each jewel with the precision of surgery. The Admiral visited every day. At first he claimed it was to check on progress. But they both knew it was for the stories. Chen told him everything. About the mission briefing. About his father's habit of checking his watch before every decision. About how he'd shared his rations with the youngest private. about how he'd known all their names, all their stories, all their families. "He talked about you constantly," Chen said on the 5th day, while repairing the escapement. "He'd show anyone who'd listen the photo he carried. You were 7, missing your front teeth, holding a baseball bat." The Admiral smiled. "I remember that photo. Little League. I struck out every at-bat that season." He was proud anyway. "Said you had heart. Said you'd do great things." Chen paused in his work. He was right. "Tell me about the end," so Chen told him. About the ambush, about the wounds, about the promise, about the watch pressed into his palm, about the words, "Tell him I was brave." "And the helicopter?" the Admiral asked. "You said it crashed. Engine failure?" Chen's hand stopped moving. He'd been dreading this question for 2 weeks. The official report says engine failure. What does the truth say? Chen set down his tools, looked at this man who'd spent 40 years wondering, who deserved honesty, even if honesty was harder than silence. The helicopter was overloaded. We'd extracted 4 more civilians than planned. The pilot said it was too much weight. He could take the team or the civilians, not both. Your father ordered him to take the civilians. The Admiral's face went pale. He stayed behind? No, he was too injured. We forced him onto the bird, but the extra weight, the helicopter barely made it off the ground. They were 3 clicks out when the engine failed. Everyone died. But the civilians, Chen's voice broke. The civilians jumped before it went down. They survived. 3 adults, 2 children. Because your father made that call. My God, the Navy couldn't acknowledge any of it. The operation didn't exist. The civilians were CIA assets we weren't supposed to be extracting. So they blamed engine failure and buried the truth. Chen picked up his tools again. Your father died saving 5 people who officially were never there. That's his real medal. The Admiral was quiet for a long time. Then, where are they now? The civilians? I don't know. Witness protection, probably. New identities. Living somewhere in America as someone else. I want to find them. Admiral, they're alive because of my father. I want them to know who saved them. Chen returned to his work. Some stories don't have endings. Just survivors. On the 14th day, Chen finished. The watch was as perfect as he could make it. Not factory new. The scars of 40 years remained. But working. Keeping time. The heart beating again after decades of silence. He wound it carefully. Set the time. Held it to his ear. The tick was steady, strong, alive. He called the Admiral. It's ready. The Admiral arrived in dress whites. Full uniform, all ribbons, 4 stars gleaming. Chen felt underdressed in his usual slacks and white shirt. You didn't have to wear the uniform, Chen said. Yes, I did. This is important. Chen opened the watch box. The Hamilton Field watch sat inside, restored, running, keeping time for the first time in 40 years. The Admiral picked it up with trembling hands, held it to his ear, heard the tick that had been silent his entire adult life. You did it, he whispered. It's not perfect. It runs about 30 seconds fast per day. You'll need to adjust it weekly. And it should be serviced every 3 years to keep it running properly. It's perfect, the Admiral said firmly. He strapped it onto his wrist. His father's watch, finally home after 40 years. Then he pulled an envelope from his jacket. I have something for you. Admiral, I don't want payment beyond what we agreed. It's not payment. He opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. I found them. The civilians. Chen's hand shook as he took the photo. 5 people standing together in front of a suburban house. An older couple, a middle-aged man and woman, a younger man, all smiling, all alive. The Nguyen family, the Admiral said, living in San Jose under their real names now. The threat passed years ago. When I contacted them and told them I was Lieutenant Bradford's son, they agreed to meet. That photo was taken last week." He pulled out another photo, Chen in the image alongside the Nguyen family, the Admiral standing with them, all of them together. "They want to meet you. They've wanted to thank you for 40 years. Chen couldn't speak. The photo blurred through tears. "They named their youngest son after my father," the Admiral continued. "William Nguyen. He's 39 now. Doctor. Married. 2 kids. All because of what you and my father did." "I didn't. You carried him out. You kept the promise. You saved the family." The Admiral's voice was firm. "You are not a coward, Sergeant Chen. You are a hero who learned how to live with survival. There's a difference." Chen looked at the photos, at the lives that had continued because of one impossible day, at the families that existed because someone made a hard call and someone else kept a promise. "I'm just a watchmaker," he said finally. "No." The Admiral picked up Chen's Omega from the workbench, the one Bradford had given him. "You're the man who fixes broken things. You fixed my father's watch. Let me fix this story." The Pentagon ceremony was small, classified. Only 50 people in the room. But they were the right 50 people. The families of the 14 men who'd died in Operation Thunder Rain, the Nguyen family, Defense Department officials who'd finally unsealed the records. Admiral Bradford, now Vice Admiral, promoted again, stood at the podium, his father's watch on his wrist, keeping time, running 30 seconds fast because some things didn't need to be perfect to be valuable. We're here today to honor 14 men who died on a mission that officially never happened. But more importantly, we're here to honor one man who survived and carried their memory forward. Chen sat in the front row, uncomfortable in the suit the Admiral had insisted he wear. Next to him, the Nguyen family. William Nguyen holding his daughter, named Grace after the Grace that had saved her grandparents. Master Sergeant David Chen, the Admiral read from the citation, for extraordinary heroism during Operation Thunder Rain, September 18, 1975. While under heavy enemy fire, Sergeant Chen single-handedly provided life-saving aid to a critically wounded officer, maintained defensive position against numerically superior forces, and ensured the successful extraction of friendly personnel and allied civilians. His actions resulted in the preservation of 5 civilian lives and exemplified the highest traditions of military service. The Silver Star, with V device for valor, 40 years late, awarded by the son of the man he'd saved, Chen accepted it because refusing would dishonor Bradford's memory. But as the Admiral pinned it to his chest, he whispered, "I was just doing my job." "No," the Admiral whispered back. "You were keeping time, making sure we all got tomorrow." After the ceremony, Chen returned to his shop. The sign still faded. The space still 12 feet wide. The clocks still ticking at different speeds. But on his workbench now, next to his tools, sat a photograph. 2 watches side by side. One perfect, one scarred. Both keeping time. Both telling stories. And above, his desk, where only he could see it, a new sign, Chen's Watch Repair. Everyone deserves tomorrow. Since 1987, a customer came in. Young Marine, dress blues, holding his grandfather's Bulova. "Can you fix this? Every other place says it's too damaged." Chen took the watch, examined it with a jeweler's eye, saw the history in its scars, the stories in its scratches. "Yes," he said, "but it will take time." "I don't mind waiting. Some things are worth fixing." Chen smiled. "Yes, they are, He set to work, his hands steady, his purpose clear, fixing broken things, keeping time, making sure everyone got tomorrow, because that's what watchmakers do. They keep the promises that matter.